All right, I'm going to get started. Just a couple things as we get going. I've written a couple things on the board, but I just want to make sure everybody gets this. This is the plan for this week. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over everything that we've done thus far. So I'm going to go over the index. I may have made a couple changes. You can map yours up. And I'm going to go over the about page, so the about.html, and we're going to look at the CSS. All right, I hope to do that fairly quickly. And then we're going to go in and we're going to look at the last page, which is the contact page, which is a form that we haven't talked about yet. Now, after we get done with that, then we want to go in and we want to take this and we want to make it responsive. All right, right now yours probably is somewhat responsive, but not very much. But if you look up on the screen here, this is what we're going to get. This is much more responsive. All right. I've made a couple changes to mine that you don't have to make. You don't have to turn this in. All right. But I do want to go over what I have done and run over that with you. Okay. So the plan is that hopefully between today and tomorrow, we'll finish this up, this first go around, this first iteration, whatever you want to call it, of this website. Then we're going to go back and we're going to redo it with Flexbox. And I'm hoping we can do that over 2 days. Now, normally Fridays normally are a lab day. If we get all that done this week, Friday will be your test. All right, just so you're aware of that. Okay, and it'll be on 7, 8, and 9. We'll see where we are. That's all I'll say. All right. I looked in here, and I believe this is set up the exact same way that Evans is set up. But what my hope is that by next week we're going to be going on. Okay, early next week. So this is what I have so far, and again, don't worry about this. We're going to add this later. This is going to be for the mobile stuff, so don't worry about that. But I'd like you to take a look at your index.html page and ideally make sure that everything that you have is what I have here. All right, and that you're not missing anything. And again, you can put that link in. You don't need to yet. You're going to have time to do that. But I mean, this pretty much the only thing that we put in here, so we've set up the char set, etc. But we added the description, if you remember, and that does say rich and famous. I realize you can't really see all that, so I don't want to break that out because it's a string. Okay, and we added the meta tags, and we added the title. I don't think there's anything new in there. All right, and you should by now have the link to Font Awesome. All right. Okay. So then going on, again, in our nav bar, there shouldn't be any problems in here either. The only thing is right now we haven't created the contact.html page. So if you try to go there, of course, you're going to get an error message. All right, just because it doesn't exist. Make sure if you haven't done so that you set the current class. So the current class should be set here for the index file, should be set to the about for the about file, and it should be set to contact for the contact file. Okay, hopefully that just makes sense to everybody. And again, what that's doing is on our site, that's making sure this right here is yellow on the associated one. Okay, what we're going to do too, if we get this done and we start on this on Wednesday, is I'm going to ask you, well, what colors should we use? Because this is kind of ugly right now, blue and yellow. So we'll come up, and if you don't like the ones that we use, let's say we use red and green, and you don't like those, just make up your own colors. That's totally fine. All right. All right. Then we had our showcase, and again, notice what's in here. We already talked about this. Everything is going to basically have, look, notice we've got a div and a div and a div. You're going to have a lot of that as you create this stuff. Do you have to do it that way? No, there's no, that I know of, there's no HTML police out there that are going to make sure you do things in a certain way. But this is quite often the way that it'll be done. So virtually everything that we're going to be doing in here in some way or another is going to have a container class in it. All right, this was that showcase content, so this is that picture. And with a find out more about us, again, that's this. Does that make sense to everybody? That's called the showcase area. All right, and when you look at what's left in here, we've got this picture. We've got this thing that says the history. There's a button here. We've got these. Yeah, I changed the color around because I thought it was a little easier to see than when I had them blue. All right. So then this was our main area right here. Notice again, we've got a section, div, class equal home info. This right here is holding that image. That is holding the image right there. Does that make sense to everybody? That thing in gray, that is going to hold, that right there is holding this right here. That's its job, for lack of better words. All right? And then on the other side of that, we've got this. Okay? And again, you may or may not have included all of these classes that I'm showing in there. I'm going to show you the CSS, so I'm going to show you the classes that I added. You'll have the exact stuff. All right? And when we get all done and everything is finished, probably what I'll end up doing is just emailing everybody a completed copy of this. So if for some reason yours doesn't work, you'll have a completed copy. This is, I don't call the stuff that I do, I don't call this a key. I call this one way of doing something, because that's what it is. All right? I mean, when you're creating a website, there is no magical way. Even if you create something for somebody and that's exactly what I want. No, it isn't. It's just not. Because they're going to change over time. You know, oh, that, you know, except for this. Because that's just life. That's the way it works. All right? So we've got that. This was the button. So notice our buttons are hyperlinks. And we're formatting them to look like buttons. Do you have to do that? No. In a couple weeks, we're going to start on something, again, I've mentioned this to you before, that's called Bootstrap. And in Bootstrap, it's even easier to do this than what we're doing. All right? So that was that. Then we've got this. This was that features section. So this last section that's here, all three of these now pretty much look the same, but that is, we're down to this now, right here. All right, these three things right here. So let's just look at one of them because we just copied them twice. So we've got a class of box, and this is putting that black border all the way around it. I want you to understand something, and if you don't, I'd really appreciate it if you'd ask, and that is this. If you look up on the screen here, so there's what? There's a border around here. I think it's like, it's either 2 pixels or 5 pixels. It doesn't matter. But do you notice that the border here and here and here look thicker, for example, than the one here? That's because you've got a border here for this one and a border here for this one. So it really is double the size. Did we have to do that? No. All right. You remember when you do a border, by default, if you just do a border, you get a top, bottom, right, and left. But you can do a border top, a border bottom, a border left, a border right, if you want to or need to do that. All right. So again, the rest of the stuff that's in here, that was just that. We've got the icon. The first one says your first home, the next one says the best realtor, and the last one says your last home. But other than that, all three of these now are exactly the same. Just the title has changed, and the, well, I should say the title changed, and for the middle one, so did the icon. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that first file? All right, and finally, we've got our footer. So it said WeSoM, it had the copyright symbol. I asked you to put your name there, of course, rather than your name here. And 2020, all rights reserved. You really should get used to putting stuff like that in your footer, like an all rights reserved. All right, that does give you some protection if somebody would ever rip off your site. Okay. No questions? Then I'm going to go on to the next one. All right. So this is the About page. And again, let's face it, Class Friday was a little bit screwed up. All right. So you may have it, you may not have it. You know, if you weren't here Friday, we had a gas leak. So we had about an hour that we were outside. All right. So this looks exactly like the page we just had, other than this right here. Because it's the About page, right? Okay. Our nav bar is the same as it was before with two exceptions. Number one, current is now set to the About as opposed to current being set to the index page. And second, we removed that picture that we had in there. Okay? Other than that, it's exactly the same thing as what we saw before. Okay, so let's come in here. So when you look at this right now, and I'm going to keep this up, but just give me a second. I want to bring it up on here. So what do we have? We already talked about this. That's our nav bar. We've already mentioned that. This is split into two. It's not by any means perfect, but we've got some text over here, and we've got a picture over here. All right, then underneath that, we've got another picture. Lovely. Great beginning, isn't it? Yeah, Mr. Corrigan said he thought that maybe it was because I had to do some updates on my machine, which were done. When I got my first programming job, I was working on the first project they actually let me do something on, where I wasn't just working on somebody else's stuff, I was working on my own stuff. And I was in a group. We've got a special kind of computer. Now it would look really ugly to you, but it was called a BLIT. It was a Bell Labs intelligent terminal. It had a bunch of stuff built into it, and if you can imagine, this one kind of turned on its side, so it was tall and thin. And I was working on it maybe the second week I was into this project, and stuff just wasn't working. And I didn't know why, and I got really mad, and I punched the screen. I forgot I had my wedding ring on. This was a $10,000 machine, and I cracked the monitor. It just went all the way down. And that afternoon, my boss walked by, and he looked at it, and he goes, "Tough day?" And I said, "Yeah, well, it has been." And he goes, "Okay." He never said another word, and I thought that was so cool that he did that, because I could have gotten myself into a boatload of trouble. I could have gotten fired over that. So that's why I'm not going to hit anything. I always, whenever I get mad and I think I'm going to hit something, I always think back to that. I'm like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that. Well, hopefully it'll stay for a bit at least. No, that was a bit. Oh my goodness. I'll try the other one again. Well, quickly, if you look, you can see the way that this is supposed to look in here. Okay? It looks a lot better than it did the other day because it's been fixed up a little bit. All right? Again, it's by no means perfect, and for some reason, I didn't spend a lot of time on it this weekend, but a little bit, because when we start cutting the size down on here, what should happen, it all looks okay until you get up to here. Now watch what happens. See how it's going over the menu? See that? It's not supposed to do that. It's probably something real simple that I'm just overlooking. All right. So let's take a look at that code if we can. All right. So what do we have here? This is our about thing. You'll notice that I set up a thing for BG Lite, which you may or may not have. Again, we'll look at it in a couple minutes, hopefully. In our CSS, but that's that light gray color. All right. And we've got a PY3 on there, and if you remember, in our utility section, we made a couple things with padding. Padding on the y-axis, and one was PY3, so that's that one. We've got our div with our class of container. All right. We've got an info here, and I tried to add a margin class. Margin was working real funky like over the weekend. I don't know why, but it was. All right. This is that heading, our founder. Then we've got a couple paragraphs here. Again, you can get that stuff in yours by just typing, if this is 30 words, just type lorem, L-O-R-E-M, 30, hit tab, and it'll put it in for you. This was another paragraph, and I think there's 20 in this one. Okay, do we have to do 30 and 20? No, you could have done one with 50. It doesn't really matter. All right. Okay, and then this was the image. And you'll notice that unlike what we did earlier, this image is not added as a background. Though all the other images we've done previously were added as background images. This one is not. This is a regular image. All right. Also, I think I mentioned this the other day. I'm saying it again anyway. That if we had done this and just left this off, that does the same thing. So to say image is the same thing as ./. Dot means from where I currently am. The reason that I'm showing you dot is as we go in here and we go through and we do a few things that are a little bit more complex, I'm going to show you some of the stuff you're going to be learning a year from now, and that is going to involve using dot and dot, etc. All right? All right, so again, this will be the picture. You always should have an alt tag. We've talked about that before. All right? Then we come in here. Does anybody remember what this is doing? This line in gray on line 64. It's clearing our floats. So what we're doing with that text that you have on the top that says our founder and it's got those two paragraphs, that's floated to the left. Where we've got the picture of the lady who's the founder of the place, that's floated to the right. So by default, stuff keeps floating until you tell it to stop floating. So that's what we're doing right here. It's, for lack of better words, we're telling it to stop floating. All right. Then we've got our testimonial section. I changed this from what our customers, satisfied customers say to what our customers say, because it looked a little nicer. That's all. Could you have left satisfied in there? Of course you could. All right. So this was that testimonial section. Again, as I mentioned, because why? Because that's kind of what our customers are doing in here. You may not like the colors that I used, which is totally fine. All right. This, what I was supposed to do on Friday, and I totally forgot all about it. I zoned out after you guys left. I basically just sat here and kind of vegetated until the class was over. I was supposed to have a meeting with that lady from the animal rescue. All right. And I forgot all about it. So I emailed her and I let her know. I said, hey, I'm really sorry. And so we're having it this Friday. All right. But she sent me back a thing just a couple minutes ago. I got the Zoom stuff, etc. on there, and she wrote back and she said, looks great, that's just the meeting information. Is there anything you'd like me to prepare or answers to specific questions you'd like me to have ready for you? You know, what I'm going to ask her basically is not to, and I won't say it like this, but do you have a clue? In other words, do you have a clue as to what you want your site to look like? And if she says, no, I really don't, I'm going to say, fine, then you know what you should do? Go out online and look at similar sites. We would never rip those off, but you can get an idea of the structure, etc., and is that what you want? And, sometimes you find by looking at that, I know what I want, now I know what I don't want. But that's a lot better than me meeting with her for a half an hour. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Geez, I don't know. I didn't think about that. All right. Okay. So, again, this is our testimonial section. This is what our customers say. This was the first client. So what do we have in there? Well, again, we've got a background of light gray. I said it was Samantha, and that was the first client, and I just added some lorem text. Does all that make sense? Then we did the exact same thing, except I called him Jonathan. And that was it, other than our footer. That's exactly the same. So Any questions on either one of those pages? Because I'm going to jump then into the CSS. All right, that's what I'm going to do right now then. So here's the styles. You might want to bring up your styles and go, because I'm going right to the top here. And you might say, we didn't have that in before. I was playing with it this weekend. All right. So this is the styles.css file. The first thing that's up there again is the reset. We just set padding and margin to 0 and box sizing to border box. I mentioned this to you already. The difference between having box sizing border box and not having it is if you've got a lot of margin and padding, border box has it all as one unit. Whatever you've got having margin and padding and the margin and padding itself is all one unit. If you don't put that in and you've got a picture and that picture has got 30 pixels of margin on each side, now the picture, instead of being this size, it's this size plus 60, 30 and 30. All right, so typically what you do is you put that in. Again, you're not mandated to do that. All right, and if you do it, you can do it anywhere you want to, but typically, why not put it here? Because it's saying it to apply this to the entire document. So to me, that made the most sense. All right, this was our main styling, and I think I mentioned this to you already, but I'm saying it again anyway. If I go back again to here, right now, we're taking up 100% of our screen length. We are. You can tell that by looking at it. You may or may not do that. You remember on your last test, you were supposed to set the screen size basically to 80%. All right, and then have your margin auto. The reason I'm telling you that is HTML is everything. So on your last test, it was all 100%. Body was just at 80%. That's the difference between those two. It's not mandatory that you do this, and a lot of people would say, well, you're never going to have any font in your HTML, so you really didn't need that in there. Probably. But just to be safe, it's put in there. All right? Now, I'm not going to do this now, but we're going to look at this when we go over the Flexbox one. You all know this, I think, that right now what we're telling it is to use this Segoe, whatever it is, UI. If you can't find it at Tahoma, if you can't find it at Geneva, if you can't find it at Verdana, if you can't find it at sans serif. The problem with using these fonts is after a while, your site looks like everybody else's. Even though the content's different because of the text. So what we will do, not now, but later, is we're going to go into fonts.google.com and we're going to use Google Fonts. Google has got, if you look in here, now it's up over 1,000. The last time I looked, it was at 954. And I'm going to let you pick out the one you want. I would suggest not picking out that one. And if you're going to, not having it bold. You don't want a site where everything is bolded. It just makes it too confusing for the user. But if you start whipping your way through here, and there's 1,000 of them, I'm not going to do this now. But you might say, yeah, I really like that one, Oswald. Okay, then use that one. And if you don't like it, you just go back and change it. And we will go through how to do all that stuff. All right? Okay. So the line height is literally the amount of space between lines. And sometimes when you put that in, you put it in because otherwise your text has a tendency to kind of run together. And it's very hard to see what's what. All right. Our H1, H2, and H3, we're saying that we want them to have padding on the bottom. Okay? And again, if you're still confused, well, you talk margin, you talk padding, etc. Go in yourselves and change these. Change it from padding bottom to margin bottom and look at the difference. All right? Our links. This says by default, even though we're changing the ones on our buttons and on our nav bar, but we're saying if we have other links, we don't want them to be underlined and we want them to be a grayish color by default. Well, I don't like that. Then make them a color you want. Some people leave them that default blue, but they just remove the underline. All right? Everybody's, the way they do this is different. All right. With our paragraphs, we want our paragraphs to have 10 pixels of margin on the top and bottom, nothing extra on the left and right. All right. Then we've got a lot of utility classes, and there are some in here that were not in here when we did this as a class last week. Here's our container. By now, you should be okay with what Margin Auto is attempting to do. All right. Margin Auto here says try to center it on all four sides. Most of the time you see 0 auto. Okay, the max width, so the maximum size screen we're expecting to have is 1100 pixels. Overflow auto means basically if there's overflow, so if I've got too much text, etc., one of the other ones is hidden. So you can hide it. Auto says try to handle it yourself, and usually what it means is if there's a lot of text, it might actually add a scroll bar for you, type of an idea. All right, and this container will automatically have 20 pixels of padding, left and right, or right and left, and none on the top and bottom. All right, the lead was for our lead paragraph, and by default I believe it's 16 pixels, so we just made it a little bigger. That's all. Again, the easiest way for you to tell what's going on with this stuff is to sit and change it. Make it a really big value or a really small value, because that's how you're going to learn. All right, then this was the button. Okay? Now, just so you know, with the display inline block, sometimes when you use certain controls and you want to do things like setting border radius or setting something else, it's almost impossible unless they're either a display block or a display inline block. That's why this is set to display inline block. The font size should make sense to you. All right. The background, that's yellow. What is that? That's a total saturation of red, a total saturation of green, and no blue. Does that make sense now to everybody looking at that number? All right. The background color, that's navy. A total absence of red, a total absence of green, and 80 of blue. All right, that's navy. How did I find that out? I literally went into Google and I typed in hex code navy, and it showed me. Padding, again, remember since there's two of them, the first one is top and bottom. The second one is right and left. All right. No border. Buttons naturally have a little border around them. And I shouldn't say that. If either buttons don't have a border around them, or I don't think actually they do, but URLs do. So remember, we're making links into buttons. So we don't want it to have a border. We want it to look like a button. All right. Cursor pointer. Okay, we want to make sure when we put our mouse on it, it turns to that little finger. Border radius, that's just going to do the rounding effect. So again, if you take a look at the buttons that are in here, you'll notice, maybe not a lot, let's go to home here, but you can see the rounded effect. All right. And again, I mentioned this last time to you, I made them bold. You didn't have to do that. I set it up so when you hovered, instead of being color and background, I reversed them. You didn't have to do that. Sometimes what you see is all somebody does is they take either a shade or two lighter or a shade or two darker than something currently is when you hover on it. You can do it whatever way you want to do it. Or it's not even mandatory that you set a hover. All right. Clear we already talked about. Again, that's going to clear left and clear right. So if you put a clear both in there. This is the L heading. I did add this, so you probably don't have that in yours. I added a little bit of line height to it, so it was spaced out a little bit. It looked a little crunched, for lack of better words. So I added line height 1.2. All right. Then we've got these three things. If you look up on the screen, everybody, please, just for a second. Does it make sense to you if there's only one of these? We could have done that. It's the same thing. So we could have put it on one line. Some people like it like that when you've got a very simple thing that you're creating. I like it the other way. to me it makes, I can really see looking at it. I can see the name, basically what I'm going to apply it to, and then what the properties are, even if it is just one. I like doing it like that, but you should start coming up with your own style. And again, I think I've said this before, but in case I haven't, when you come up with your own style, just be consistent. All right? Even a bad style is better than no style at all, as long as you're consistent with it. All right, so that was the padding 10, 20, and 30. Instead of P1, P2, and P, we could have called them PY10, PY20, PY30. There's no problem doing that. All right, here was the neutral color. I don't even think I'm using this anymore because this was a gray, but I think it was darker than I wanted it to be. So I added this BG light. You may not have these three things on yours. You'll want to look. Whoops. But you may or may not have those on yours. So the first one was the light. And literally, again, I went in and put in light gray hex code. All right, and that's the one I used. And you might notice if you look here, these are lowercase, these are uppercase. When you're putting in those numbers, it doesn't matter which you use. So if that bugs you, then just make it little d's on here, or make it big F's on here. But again, I wasn't consistent there, but you really should be. All right, here was that border, probably thicker than I needed it to be. 10 pixels, solid black. Again, I could have put the word black in there as well. Or I could have put in RGB 000 in parentheses. Or I could have left it like it was and put in pound 000000. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. Margin, just gave me some top and bottom margin. This is when I was starting to play around with this stuff a little bit. All right. Then we've got our nav bar. Again, background of blue, color of yellow, width should take up 100%. This is different. You don't have this. Position fixed and top 0. I wanted the nav bar to not move. You may or may not have noticed it on yours, but if you start scrolling, your nav bar disappears. It doesn't when you do this. All right, that's the advantage of doing it. Did you have to do that? No. All right, but there, that might be a time when you're creating something for someone. They might, well, where's my nav bar? If you're creating something for an end user, so you might want to just set it up like that from the get-go. Also with 100%. If I didn't have that width of 100% in there, it tried to basically collapse it, and it took the my home, my about, and my contact, and it basically laid them right on top of the heading that we had in there, the WeSoM thing. All right. Okay. Then the links automatically yellow. This is the logo. Yours probably says H1, but we gave the H1 a class of logo. If you're going to give something a class, you really should be using it. That's why that's in there like that. All right? All right, this was the unordered list. And again, you really want to learn this stuff. Start taking these. Don't remove any of the code, but comment it out or change the numbers. You'll see stuff whipping around all over the screen when you do that. Not a bad thing. Just as long as you know how to get back again when after you've done that. I remember years ago I went to Canada with a woman I was going out with at the time. And when we were coming back, I had the map there, and literally she took the map, and I thought she was going to throw it out the window, but she didn't. But she threw it out the back seat, into the back seat. She said, "You know what? I'll let you use the map, but we're taking back roads the entire way back." And we did. That was a really cool time. I discovered a lot of stuff I wouldn't have known otherwise. Same kind of thing in here. That's how you learn. All right. So this was that showcase. So this is what we had this was right underneath our nav bar on our first page. There's the background, the no repeat. If you don't put that in there, if you put it on a really, 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 really big device, it tries to repeat. We don't want that to repeat. We only want that in there once. We want it centered on the page, and we want it to cover the entire amount that we're dedicating it to. That's why we've got this. The content, can see that the color, so the text color is black, it's center aligned, and padding top. Sometimes you got to play around with this stuff, sometimes you don't. All right. So this was the H1, made the font size 60 pixels, made the line height 1.2 em. You know, again, when we go and we create this, at least the plan right now is, when we create this using Flexbox, we won't have any, we'll have either no pixels at all or very few. We're probably just going to use rems and percentages ideally for everything. All right, to help make it as responsible as possible. So there's our H1. Here's our paragraph. Here's our button. So that's that one button. Remember, I said showcase dot button. That means only the button that's in the showcase area. The other ones won't be affected. If I left showcase off of there, it would be every button. Okay? So here was that home info section. It was underneath that. Change this from 400 to 450 because otherwise the button was resting way down at the bottom. Okay? Then put in that second URL that was in there. In fact, this was the height for the home info. So this was that picture. All right, and you can see the min height. Then this, the image, so this was the whole thing. This was the whole home info area. But it had a left and a right to it. It's important when you start thinking about how you set that up, if you're going to have a left and a right like that, that one of them is going to be probably floated left, the other one's probably going to be floated right. And as you can see in here, the width of each one is 50%. Did we have to do that? No. Maybe we want the picture to take up 70% and the text to only take up 30%, or vice versa, or any number in between. So this was that image. This image right here, this home info image, is this one, right there. So again, left float, 50% width, there it is. No repeat center cover, already mentioned. Min height, just put that in there. You know, basically take all you can, height-wise. The content, look at these two. Float left, float right. With 50%, with 50%. All right? And this one's got a height of 100 and a min height. I don't think it would have mattered if I would have put min height on this one. Take all the text that's in there and center align it. Add some padding. The background should be this grayish color. All right? And the color, text color, is going to be black. All right. Paragraphs, give them some bottom padding. And our button, give it some top margin. Okay. Then we had our box. Remember, this right here, that is these. Okay. They are symmetric right now. You know, and one thing I noticed this weekend, probably shouldn't say this because it's being taped. I think it's being taped. Good. Well, I thought I was, you know, my wife's worse than I am. All right. I mean, it's like if I would have made these 35%, 35%, and like 25%, it would have bugged the hell out of her. All right. I just wanted them to basically be the same size, but not necessarily that it had to be. So each one of these, notice float left. There is no float center. But as soon as I say to float to the left, everything else, these are all, believe it or not, you might say, well, those two aren't floated left. Yes, they are. This says, okay, take as much space as you need on the left. Then this one says, whatever's left, start right there and take up the space you need. And whatever's left, you do the same. All right. Padding, I mean, hopefully the stuff that's in here makes sense. I don't remember what the box I is offhand. And this is our about page. So again, you notice we've got some margin top. We've got an info left. We've got an info right. Again, left, right, 50%, 50%, 100%, 100%. All right. This was that image on the right-hand side. This was the image of the lady. Display block, margin auto. Notice width 70%. I wanted to take up the entire area. Wanted there to be some padding around there. And the border radius 50%. Again, that's what made it round. Here's our testimonial section. As you can see, height 100%, width 100%, okay? This background here, this mansion 2, this thing, this URL that you see right there, that is this picture that you see right here. All right? And I didn't really like the way black came out on here. I tried white. I tried a few other colors. I guess we could have put it up here and moved it up. The problem was that when you made it small, it looked funky on there. All right? That's why I left it the way it was. Now, you may or may not be able to notice this when you look on the screen here. The picture that you see right here, these two things, they both have that opacity set to 90%. They're 10% see-through, so to speak. All right? And then as usual, we've got our footer on the bottom. So this was the H2 in the testimonials. This was the testimonial class itself. There's the opacity that I already mentioned. All right, there's the image, and there was our footer. Now again, you may not have every single thing. Yours may not look exactly like this, but my question to you, is there anyone who has any questions on anything we've done thus far? All right, then let's start getting ready to create our contact page. There's a lot of ways we can do this, but this is the way I'm going to do it, and I'd like you to do it this way. Bring up your about.html. Do a file. Save as. Okay. And now we're going to call it contact.html. I put mine inside of double quotes, so I'm sure it won't put anything before it or after it, like a .txt on the end. All right, so hit enter, and now I've got contact. Now, you're all smart enough that you know this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to refresh the screen. Now I can go to contact, but it looks just the same, because as of right now, these are both the exact same thing. All right, they'll act the same, they'll react the same, or whatever you want to say to that. All right, so promise at 9 o'clock I'm giving you a break. But let's just, before then, let's start doing some work with this. So I'm on the contact page, and let's just take it from the top here. You should already know this stuff. First thing in line 10, I don't want it to be about, I want that to be contact. Make sense? All right. Everything else that's in here is fine. We will want to go back and add in here. Remember the last one we didn't have any icons? So I'm going to go back to my index. You can do the same. I'm going back to my index, and I'm finding that style sheet for Font Awesome, which for mine is lines 11 and 12. You may have it all on one line. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to contact here, and I'm going to add that right here. So now I've got Font Awesome available to me. All right, so all I did was I went back to the original page, the index page, grabbed that link for Font Awesome, copied it to the clipboard, and then added it here. Again, we're going to do the thing with mobile later, so don't worry about it. Then, jumping into here, the Nav Bar. One change to make, where we've got here class equal current. We don't want that for our about anymore. We want it down here for our class equal contact. All right. Other than that, I'm going to grab virtually everything that's in here, all those sections, both those sections that are in here. I'm going to highlight them both, and they're now gone. All right, and I'm going to save, and now notice if I run this, not much of a page here. Totally fine. All right, I might have even taken out too much. I don't know, because I did not want to take out, oh, I got the footer. It'll all come back. All right, as we start to add things. Now, we are going to start going over forms which are not touched on in your book till chapter 13. This will be a good introduction. That's all this is meant to be, is an introduction. Absolutely nothing more than that. All right, so what do we got here? I got this. There we go. All right. Just so you know, don't type this, please. But just so you know, when you create a form tag, we're going to do this later, but I'm not going to do it right now. All right? Typically what you put in here are things like method equal, and usually the word that you put in here is either post or it's get. Okay, it's one of those two things. Okay, if I go out right now, if I come in here and I go out, and let's say that, I don't know if this will work, but we'll try it here. Let's just go to Rankin, and I'm going to click there. Okay, and I'm going to go down to here. No, it's just giving me a path. Okay, then I'll do it this way. Let's say that I go out to Amazon. All right, and let's say that I'm going to get a book. Okay, and I want a book on, I don't know, CSS. All right, CSS, HTML and CSS for beginners. And I decide I want, I'll take this one. It's got a paperback. So I put that in there. All right. What I'm trying to tell you is if you start looking in here, what I want you to understand is, you see this, where I am right now? Everybody see that in blue? Right before that is a question mark. Everything that comes after that question mark is known as a query string. It's got information in there. So it would have information, maybe it would have the type of book this is. Notice keywords is CSS. It might have the author's name. It might have the ISBN. It might have the price, etc. The point is, this is a get. Because with a get, you see that information up on the top of the page. Okay? On the other hand, if I went in to buy something, I don't want that stuff to be showing right there where it's got my MasterCard number and etc. I don't want that. That's a post. So when you've got a get, the stuff appears up in the query string at the top of the screen. When you've got a post, the stuff appears in what are called the HTTP headers. So they're buried in there. The information is still in there, but it's harder for people to find. All right. The other thing, too, is typically when you do something like this, you also say something like action equals, I don't know, process.php, something like that. And what that means is, once you put everything in, if you filled it out correctly, it's going to go out to Amazon's server, and it's going to try to find a file called process.php and run it against it. What we do in this entire class this semester is all client side. We're not doing any of that stuff. All right? I could show you that, but I don't want to confuse anybody. But I'm just telling you that there is stuff, so to speak, that you do. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start, let's see, what do we have? I think there's two sections in here. All right, so I'm going to come in and start making my sections. In fact, just to make it a little easier for myself, I'm going to make a section tag here. And I'm going to put another one down below it. Again, yours is, since you're using really a better editor than what I have, all right, easier, probably a little easier for you to write, but that's fine. So this first section is going to have an ID equals about contact form. All right. And I am going to put a class in here. Again, hopefully you remember what that class is. That's going to give me 30 pixels of padding, top and bottom. We're going to put what we have been using for virtually all of this, class equal container. I'm going to end my div. I'm going to have an H1 in here. H1. The class is going to be equal to that L heading. Remember, that was a little bit bigger sized. And it's just going to say, contact us. Now you probably, I mean, we could have been much more elaborate here. You know, please fill in all the form fields below and click submit to send us an email. You know, we could have said all that stuff. I just kept it simple. All right. But just in case people had a problem, I did put a little paragraph underneath that, with not much in it. But this is actually English. I didn't put lorem here. I just put, please fill out the form below to contact us. Okay? And again, this by no means is this perfect. And let's admire our handiwork so far. Not much. All right? But that's fine. It's totally fine the way it is. All right? I'm going to quickly type in the form right now. It's probably about 10 or 15 lines. Then we're taking a break. All right. So I want to make sure I'm still in that div. And I'll move this way up here. There we go. So I'm just going to say in here, action equals this. In English, what that means is go nowhere. Did you hear me? This form is not designed to go anywhere. And that's totally fine. We'll talk about all of this stuff after the break. Now, because I want us to be able to finish this, I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to copy it down. This one is going to say email. I'll turn that down in a minute. And I'll tell you what, let me put the last one in quickly. This one's going to look a little bit different, so. Because this one is a text area, so. And then finally, because this will finish the form. Now, remember, when you take a quick look at this, okay, I'm going to save this and I'm going to come back to here. But remember, it's probably going to look ugly because there's been no CSS added to it yet. So let's see what it looks like. Okay? Doesn't look good. The point is, you can see we've got a name field, we've got an email field, and we got a message field. That's good. All right? And we got a submit button, and that's already got our coloring on it. All right? So finish typing that in, if you would. Take a break. It's 9 o'clock right now. We will plan on starting up then. Make sure I'll give you 5 minutes to do this, so we'll start up at 9:20. Okay? And I'll tell you what, just let me pause this.